So we have a little bit of time, and Charlie asked if I wouldn't mind taking some questions. I would be happy to. So if you guys have questions, I guess there are 2 microphones up here, or you can yell it out and I'll repeat the question. No one wants to go first. There you go. If you guys can tell me your names too, so.
Drake Custer, Local 48G. When you told the story about Apple, how do you think we can get companies to commit to having jobs in America, like on the DREAM Act? You know, and getting these mid-level engineers, you know, science and math experts to stay in America.
Yep.
Do you think we can get companies to really commit to keeping those jobs in America?
I do, and I think you brought up something called the DREAM Act, which ties into immigration reform. And this is I'm so glad you talked about that, because this is something that almost never comes up. There's such a huge line between short-term and long-term growth. So when you hear the president talking about things like the DREAM Act, or things like comprehensive immigration reform, it's designed to fix that short-term labor shortage. But it's not designed, obviously not designed to replace American innovation and our own workers and our own innovators. So for example, if as Apple hypothetically is projecting that it's going to take them 10 years or 20 years to bring manufacturing jobs here, because that's how long it's going to take our young people to go through those programs, well then something like comprehensive immigration reform will fix that now. So the jobs are coming here now in the short term, and then our workers are sustaining them in the long term. So I'm glad you brought that up. When you guys are talking to your friends about not just the tax policy side of it, and wanting to make sure that we're rewarding companies that are bringing jobs back here, there is an immigration component to it as well.
Hi. I'm glad to see that OFA has adopted giving ownership to people in their own neighborhoods. I know this is something that we've done in my local, and it's been very successful. You give people comfortable surroundings to work in, and they'll get the job done. And I'm glad to see that OFA has done that also.
Thank you. I'll pass that on. I think that frankly, especially here in Iowa, comes from 2 things. It comes from what you all had built, even before this round of elections, but frankly before 2007. And it also has to do with the president's approach. I mean, the fact that he was a community organizer, he was a constitutional law professor. He was a single parent. His mom didn't have access to health care and unfortunately died of cancer. Those are all things that I think have to do with his organizing strategy and the strategy of the campaign. Like I said, we're never going to raise the tens of millions the way that Governor Romney will from undisclosed donations, but what we do have is a great organizational structure, I think, thanks to all of you.
Thank you for coming to Iowa, back to Iowa. My name is Gabriel Delacerda. I was curious what the Obama campaign was doing to go ahead and try to re-energize the youth vote. Right now we're under a lot of pressure with student loans. I know it was an election or a congressional issue the past couple of months, but really the new college-educated individual coming into the workforce is basically coming out with between $60,000 and $100,000 worth of student loan debt, which companies know, and basically put them into a program where they're basically an indentured servant.
That's right. I'm really glad you brought that up. So this was one of the things I had the privilege of working on at the White House was youth issues and in particular student loans. It's taken a sort of a bizarre stand during the campaign. If you followed Twitter, and Governor Romney got that question in the town hall from a young person, what do I do, about college affordability? And the governor's response was, well, you should shop around for the cheapest tuition. I'm like, okay, well, we already do that. Obviously, you're not going to not do that. And so I think that's what the president's planning kicks in. The sort of character contrast there is that the president and first lady paid off their student loans only recently. I think it was about 8 years ago that they were able to do that. So he understands very intimately what that was like. Now, when we were at the White House, there were a couple of things the president wanted to do. Something called the Pell Grant was something that he successfully increased. I think it's about $5,500. That's a grant that a lot of young people can qualify for that they didn't before. There was restructuring of the student loan program. So this didn't get a lot of attention, I think, because it happened right around the time that healthcare reform did. But essentially what it did was it eliminated about $60 billion that was of money that was being lent from the federal government to big banks. And what big banks would do is they would mark up this money exorbitantly, shocking, and then loan it back out to young people. And so young people were paying these exorbitantly high interest rates on money that essentially was money that the federal government was giving these banks for our education. So what the president did was got rid of that middleman student lending. So certainly the banks weren't very happy about this because they couldn't mark up free money. But what it did result in was a lot of young people that can access the $60 billion of additional money to go to college at much lower interest rates. There was also something called the American Opportunity Tax Credit. Now, you mentioned congressional action. This is something that falls under that category, and I'm glad you brought it up because it probably couldn't be a greater contrast between what the Obama administration and the Democrats wanted to do versus what the Republicans wanted to do. So one of the issues when Speaker Boehner and the Republicans were threatening to shut down the government, one of the issues was the American Opportunity Tax Credit. What that is credit for any young person, any person frankly, that wants to go to college. You get up to $10,000 over the course of 4 years, so it's broken up into $2,500 a year as a tax credit to pursue that higher education, whether it's college, trade school, whatever you want to do. That $2,500 was something that the president increased from a previous amount. And when Speaker Boehner came into the White House to threaten shutting down the government, they had a closed-door negotiation, and the first thing that Speaker Boehner put on the table was he said, Mr. President, let's just agree that we're getting rid of the American Opportunity Tax Credit. And the president stood up and he said, are you serious? This is the first thing you're bringing to my table when we need to come up with a rational compromise for the American people so that the government is not being shut down, is that you want to get rid of a tax break for young people to pursue job training and a higher education? And he said, yeah, let's just agree that that's something that we will take. And the president stood up and called his bluff. And he said, if you want to shut down the government over college affordability, be my guest. You can be the one that has to explain to the American people why you're going to go ahead and do that. And why. And so AOTC, or the American Opportunity Tax Credit, thankfully remains at $2,500 a year for up to 4 years because the president stood his ground and Speaker Boehner had to cave on something like that. So thankfully they didn't shut down the government and we preserved something like the American Opportunity Tax Credit. The reason I bring up that contrast is when you're talking about someone like Governor Romney who agrees with Speaker Boehner or Paul Ryan's budget, but we've got our communities, got education, got healthcare, and not replace it with anything. Those are what the stakes are right now. So I'm glad you brought up congressional action. I think that's why, aside from supporting the president, we're hoping that you do go up and down the ticket. I don't say that as a Democrat. I'm still an independent, which is something that I love about Iowa. There's some independents here. But practically speaking, when you're talking about AOTC, immigration reform, how to get jobs back and manufacturing back here, those are all so intricately tied together. And feel free to repeat that story, by the way, because there was nobody in the room aside from the negotiating team, and I got this email on my desk saying, call from someone on the econ team, call me right now. I just got to tell you the most badass story about what the president just did.
I'm Lon Kemmeyer from Waterloo, the ATU, but anyway, my question is why the President doesn't tell Congress that as far as student loans go, why don't the students have to pay the same interest rate that the banks do that they're paid back? Wouldn't that make it, that would help, that'd be better than that 3.4%, wouldn't it?
Meaning why are the students paying a higher rate?
Yeah.
So that's a good question. One of the, and I probably forgot to mention this portion of it. So one of the things that, and I think that you're talking partially about public versus private loans. So private loans, unfortunately, we don't have control over. We also don't have control over private universities increasing tuition exorbitantly, which is an issue the White House is working on, but that's our hands tied a little bit, obviously, because it's the private sector. For public loans, there are public programs that are trying to be worked out. So when there's direct lending, that direct lending, if you go into a job that's a service profession, or if you make your on-time payments, I think it's between 5 and 10 years, depending on the job and your payments, your student loans are actually forgiven. So it's not just reducing it to a bank rate, but it's completely eliminating those loans as long as it's student loan forgiveness. You can also revamp your student loans, so you can apply for a lower rate. It used to be that, and some folks are unfortunately grandfathered into this, but it used to be that if you're paying one of these exorbitant rates from long ago, now that the rates are lower, the president believes that you should be able to get those lower rates. I'm glad you asked that, and this is probably a good time to plug also just on the Barack Obama page, there are a bunch of the website, there are a bunch of pull-down tabs on policy. So this is one of those questions that if you do have the time and interest, there are 5 or 10 page documents that you can search for exactly what you're looking for. Or I'm going to maybe throw our folks at the table under the bus a little bit, ask them to do the research for you.
I resent that under the bus, okay?
I should come up with a better analogy.
It was the Romney bus.
It was, yeah. Yeah, okay. So one more question?
Hi, Cal. My name is Josh. I'm the labor liaison with the United Way Quad Cities. My question, this week we had some breakout sessions. One of them was about Obamacare. And my experience with it, I think, that's shared with others in the room, was that it was a bit of a revelation. We learned a lot about the policy. We were empowered with the facts. We busted a lot of bogus myths. And I think the thing that, for me, from a strategy standpoint, is I guess I'm curious why the president and the Democrats haven't taken to the pulpit and really spelled out these benefits, that this bill is a good bill, that it is in the long term reducing the deficit. You can look at the letter from the director from the Congressional Budget Office to John Boehner. Repealing this would increase the long-term deficit, long-term debt. So I guess I'm just curious why there's been a shying away from it, just in general, the national strategy.
Yes. It's a very good question. I think the answer is a little bit painful. It's ultimately, so the good and bad part about living in a democracy is that we don't control the media. And sort of similar to, I think, the stakes with someone like Governor Romney having access to millions of dollars in corporate donations versus, our field army. There was really no resource base on the Democratic side to take out things like paid ads, national paid ads, or to take out big billboards, or to put, huge front page ads in the register or things like that. The Republicans, financed by these big companies that didn't want healthcare reform to pass had those resources, and so there was sort of this lopsided debate to begin with. One of the strengths that I think the president himself said we could have and should have done better and we need to do better at are how we can combat that. And the way that we combat that is through folks like us. It's a lot of through word of mouth. It's through op-eds, so it's through what's called earned media instead of paid media. We don't have the financial resources to pay for those ads, but we do have the brain power and the person power to write those op-eds and to knock on doors. So it's great that you guys are doing that, because that's something that we're doing on the youth side as well. You have all these young people, I think it's now 3.1 million that have access to healthcare that didn't before. A lot of them don't even know it. And it's through that word of mouth of explaining to them, here's the website you go to, here are the resources, here's why you don't know about this. It was incredibly frustrating, I can assure you, for those of us in the White House to see that we weren't getting that message out there. And to understand that we weren't getting the message out there because there wasn't that financial resource base. The choices we can sort of sit here and continue to be frustrated about, or we can get off our butts and actually, make sure that everyone knows about this, which is, I think, the nice thing about what all of our communities have been focusing on the last couple of months. So that's actually a great wrap-up question, because the final thing I was gonna share with you guys was would love your help between now and November. Anything you can do to get the word out about healthcare reform, explain to folks why immigration is tied into jobs coming back to the United States, investing in job training and education for young people would really help move the needle a long way. So thank you guys so much for having me, and I really appreciate it. It's always nice to come and talk to fellow union members about things like this. So thank you very much.
Well, I must confess, when they said that they were sending a surrogate by the name of Kal Penn, and I said, what? I've never seen a Harold and Kumar movie. I mean, have to go check that out. And he said he was really bright, you know, and I thought, okay, that's fine, I appreciate that. I sat here and he was talking about a host of complex issues, and there was not no one on the podium. He is right, and we appreciate having a fellow union member standing up for President Obama and trying to make